So Jerry Koosman won 4 World Series games for the Mets. And to some extent, he also helped to save 2 World Series games for them, including this one to close out the 1986 season. Way back in 1979, the Mets had sent Koosman to the Twins for a player to be named later, which turned out to be second-round pick Jesse Orosco. Welcome to Transaction Action. This is a new series exploring how great teams were built, transactionally speaking. Okay, for the 86 Mets, the most significant transaction was the 1983 trade that saw the Mets acquire our old friend Keith Hernandez from the Cardinals for Neil Allen and Rick Ownby. This was certainly a terrible deal by the Cardinals, but Whitey Herzog was sick of Keith's shit and wanted him gone. Herzog felt Hernandez was dogging it, complaining about Keith's pregame habits, where he would mostly sit in the clubhouse smoking cigarettes and doing crossword puzzles. So basically, Keith got ousted for being too cool. And check out this article from the New York Times from the time of the trade. Love this bizarre quote from Mets manager Davey Johnson. "Some great players do puzzles. Henry Aaron listened to music. Was it somehow out of the ordinary for a baseball player to listen to music back in the day? This guy Hank's a bit of a wild man. He likes to listen to a ditty once in a while." Anyway, just a terrible trade by the Cardinals. Ownby was a marginal big leaguer. Neil Allen had some solid years in New York as a reliever and a swingman, but Keith was just 4 years removed from an MVP season and was a consistent 5-WAR player. It's true that the Cardinals had no pitching in '83, but had a good offensive team with a glut of outfielders. George Hendrick, Willie McGee, Lonnie Smith, David Green, and Andy Van Slyke were all vying for playing time. Trading Keith allowed them to move Hendrick to first, but still, you'd think Whitey could have gotten more out of him even if he was fed up. Mets catcher John Stearns said it best. Were the Cardinals drunk when they made that deal? The next big trade happened just prior to 1982 when the Mets dealt fan favorite Lee Mazzilli, who had been an excellent player in the late 70s but had a subpar and injury-riddled year in '81. In exchange, the Rangers sent 2 minor league starters, Ron Darling and Walt Terrell. We of course know Ron Darling as Keith's partner in the booth and as a consistent starter who had a career year in '86. Walt Terrell put up a couple of solid starting seasons for the Mets before being dealt again after the '84 season to the Tigers for Howard Johnson, who would become a solid contributor to the '86 squad as a utility infielder, moving between third and short. Mazzilli would bounce around after this trade, basically a slightly above replacement level role player. Clearly, this was another boon for the Mets, and the cherry on top was that Mazzilli returned to the Mets mid-year in '86 after being cut by the Pirates, in time to provide his own contribution to the championship team. He gave the Mets an extra spark down the stretch, OPSing .848 in 72 plate appearances, and then going 2 for 5 in the World Series in pinch hitting duty. Another big trade occurred in the offseason prior to 1986 that saw the 2 eventual World Series combatants deal significant players to each other. The Mets dealt 1983 first-round draft pick Calvin Schiraldi to the Red Sox for starter Bob Ojeda. Ojeda had been a solid starter for the previous 3 seasons, but would have a career year in '86. Meanwhile, Schiraldi would find himself as a reliever in Boston after struggling with the Mets. Weirdly, you could say both ends of this trade helped the Mets, as Ojeda was a Cy Young contender for New York, while Schiraldi blew the save in the 10th inning of Game 6. Next, we've got a trade that worked out fairly well for both sides. In the offseason before '85, the Mets acquired Hall of Fame catcher Gary Carter from the Expos. Going into his age 31 season and coming off 3 straight 7+ WAR seasons, this was not actually a terrible move by the Expos. Carter had just one more elite season in the tank, in 1985 for the Mets. Then his regression kicked in rapidly. He was still an excellent player in '86, but his production did fall off from his previous heights. And after '86, he was not very good. In exchange, the Mets gave up a former #1 prospect in Hubie Brooks, who had been a decent third baseman for the Mets for 5 seasons. He shifted to short for Montreal and continued his solid performance, but put together an insane season in 1986, where he amassed 4.7 WAR in just 80 games. But his season ended early due to a hand injury. Also included in the deal was Floyd Yeomans, a second-rounder who put together 4 okay seasons as a starter for the Expos, highlighted by a very good 3.7 WAR year in '86. The Expos also got Herm Winningham, a first-round draft bust who was fast but couldn't hit, and Mike Fitzgerald, a functional backup catcher. I think if you're the Expos there, you hoped Hubie Brooks would become a consistent superstar and that Winningham would become a solid everyday outfielder, while Yeomans is a decent mid-rotation starter. They didn't quite get all the way there. The Mets got what they wanted, but the Expos didn't get totally fleeced. Next, we've got the third starting pitcher the Mets picked up via trade with Sid Fernandez, a third-round pick by the Dodgers who was dealt to the Mets after the '83 season for Bob Baylor, a decent glove-first utility guy, and Carlos Diaz, a reliever who had one very good year for the Mets in '83. This was another big win for the Mets as Sid played 10 years for them, putting up 27.6 WAR in that time. But why did the Dodgers sell so low on Sid? Well, they thought he was too lugged up to make it as a big league pitcher. Then we've got Ray Knight, who was a midseason acquisition from Houston in '84 in exchange for Gerald Young and Manny Lee, two prospects who would have a handful of solid seasons later on, but Ray Knight solidified the '86 Mets with a veteran presence and a fighting spirit while posting 2.4 WAR. Then we've got the George Foster trade from 1982. The declining Foster had a couple of okay seasons for the Mets in '84 and '85, but there was no room for him in that 1986 outfield with Dykstra, Strawberry, Mookie, and Mitchell. Or maybe Foster just wasn't meshing with the Mets party team vibe.
Don't be a yes man, say no to drugs.
He was released August 7th despite still having some home run pop. Back in '82, the Mets had traded away Greg Harris, who was a surprisingly good reliever, Jim Kern, a poorly aging veteran pitcher, and Alex Trevino, a competent backup catcher. The Mets would also make a smart Moneyball trade just prior to the '86 season, picking up solid platooning infielder Tim Tuffle in exchange for Billy Beane. Yes, that Billy Beane. And of course mentioned it in the intro, but the oldest transaction for this '86 squad was the 1979 trade of aging Mets hero Jerry Koosman for prospect Jesse Orosco. Koosman would actually lead the league in WAR at 7.2 in '79 before declining, but still putting up some solid seasons before retiring in '85. The Mets were a mess in '79, so trading Koosman was a smart move even if he still did have a lot of life left. And it paid off with Orosco, who was the key piece of the '86 bullpen. These are by and large very good trades for the Mets, but they can't all be winners. And there is one monumentally bad trade mixed in here. Danny Heap, a solid professional hitter on the bench and founding member of the Scum Bunch, was acquired after the '82 season in exchange for 1986 Cy Young winner Mike Scott. Ouch. Can you imagine this team with Mike Scott in the rotation? Good lord. The only other trade on here is pretty minor, the Mets trading OK starter Jay Tibbs for swingman Bruce Berenyi, who would actually be the worst player on the '86 Mets. So, there you go. What did we learn?
I don't fucking know either.
I'd like to close out this video by doing a little exercise I like to call, what if they did nothing? So, what if the Mets had not made any of these trades? What kind of team would they have been in '86? Obviously, you can't prove a counterfactual, and this can't account for intangibles like veteran leadership and chemistry. But let's get a bit nutty with it. First off, here are the 25 players who played the most for the Mets in 1986. We'll assume all the players who played less than these guys will remain the same. We'll fill in the rest of this roster from guys the Mets traded away. And I'm just going to duplicate this line down here so you can keep track of the difference. So we've got Alex Trevino catching, Lee Mazzilli playing first. This is the Mazzilli before he came back to the Mets. Hubie Brooks takes over at third. We had Herm Winningham, Billy Beane, Manny Lee, and Mike Fitzgerald to the bench, making this a god-awful bench. But in the rotation, we get Mike Scott, Floyd Yeomans, and Jay Tibbs instead of Darling, Ojeda, and Fernandez. And for the bullpen, we drop Orosco, Berenyi, and Randy Neiman, who had been acquired in a tiny trade I didn't mention. And we replace them with Neil Allen, Greg Harris, and Calvin Schiraldi. And, they'd have the exact same amount of WAR, pretty much. Makes you wonder why you bother to do anything, and if free will even exists. Now, obviously this is less than scientific, especially since these three alternate relievers account for nearly twice as many innings as the guys they replaced. So if you halved those guys' WAR, the actual Mets would win this exercise by about 4 wins above replacement. But you would also have to assume that the three new superior relievers would siphon off some of the innings of the others in the pen, especially Doug Sisk and Rick Anderson. But we can't really get into that kind of stuff here, or we'll end up in the old multiverse of madness, and nobody wants that. But I will say that the position player side of this alternative roster accounts for a lot fewer plate appearances than their actual Mets counterparts. As we mentioned, Hubie Brooks only played 80 games, so probably Kevin Mitchell gets a bunch more playing time at third. Wally Backman was atrocious against lefty pitching, so losing Tuffle means Manny Lee is going to have to get a lot more playing time, which doesn't hurt you or help you as he was right at replacement level. Mookie would likely get some more starts in the outfield, and Lee Mazzilli only had 120 plate appearances, so either he gets more playing time or somebody like Dave Magadan, who spent most of 86 in the minors, gets a larger role. Magadan seemed ready for the bigs. He was great the following season, but he was just blocked by Keith Hernandez. What the? Oh crap, I opened up a multiverse portal. I knew this was gonna happen.
Little roller up along first to Buckner. He will do it himself.
Thank goodness. I don't want this one to end for a while.
Sorry guys, I done goofed and took us into the multiverse of madness. But I hope you liked the video nonetheless. Please like and subscribe for more transaction action.
I'm in charge of the